Happy New Year! This is the Fantasy Football Fellowship Podcast. I'm Bryce Johnson. Flying solo today. Unfortunately, Harrison is sick. But I'm your fantasy coach. I was here all season, here to encourage and help you win while also finding meaning and purpose throughout the fantasy season. Did you win? How did things finish up? Fantasy championship weekend this past weekend. It was intense. It was wild. We saw some monster performances from a couple surprising players, but then some of the guys that carried you to a championship. And I'm excited. I did win one championship. So we celebrate that. I'll fill you in on a couple of the other takeaways from our leagues here at Fantasy Football Fellowship and unpacking it, and some of my personal leagues as well. But we have got a lot to get to today as we reflect back on this season. What are the big takeaways? What did we learn? What do we anticipate going into next year? Do we still feel as confident in drafting wide receivers in the first round? What about my theory about taking Travis Kelce in the first round? Seems like that ship has sailed. We are now done with that. However, we'll be surprised with where Travis Kelce actually finished this year in regards to tight end rankings. And then I was doing some research. There were 3 quarterbacks that finished in the top 12 that I still can't believe is true. So we'll look at those names, and at least one of them probably won't be a starter next year in the NFL. So what do we make of that? And then, I want to continue to hear from you. What players carried you to a fantasy championship? Who did you rely on? And so we'll have some fun looking at all the different positions throughout the year. And really, okay, who did we miss and whiff on this year? And then who were some of those guys we talked about here on this show that came through for me? Hopefully you followed the advice and they came through for you as well. So who are some of those players? But before we get going, let me just say this. We are thrilled with the way Fantasy Football Fellowship turned out this season. A number of churches and leagues that participated in the weekly content. The feedback that we received was really positive, really encouraging. And so we're so thankful and excited that leagues had a great season, that true, fellowship took place. Faith was built. You grow in your faith throughout the season with other members of your league. And so that's our hope and our desire for why we do Fantasy Football Fellowship. And so it's designed for leagues. It's designed for churches as well, to run leagues within their church. And so we'd love to hear any feedback too. If you haven't reached out yet, would love to know how things turned out for you. And so we're gearing up again. We'll be ready for another season of Fantasy Football Fellowship. And so start making your plans now. Get your league together. If you didn't do it this year with the weekly breakouts, now's the time to start putting that on people's radar for next year. And so we begin today with the final breakout topic of this season. All right, the 2023 season. And we wrap it up with a topic on humility. Because whether you won your league or you lost and you had a horrible season, humility is at play. And so in life, whether we're going through good times or bad times, humility is in play. And so do we live our lives with humility? Are we humble in fantasy and in life? And so let's start on the fantasy side. The goal is to win the championship, right? I was able to win one championship. That's the goal for all of us. We want to win the fantasy championship. It's fun. It's exciting. But why do we like to win? Right? I mean, it's the goal, so you want to do it. But part of it is we like to beat our friends, our coworkers, friends at church. We want to be able to say, hey, I was the champ. But how do we actually, live that out? Do I, text everybody and say, nah, look at me. Look how great I am. Well, no, nobody likes that guy, right? We want to be able to win with humility. We say, yeah, I won. I set out to win, and that's what I did. Act like you've been there before, right? And so it's fun to, you don't need the false humility, right? That's a whole nother topic. But yeah, I won. I'm excited about it. I'm happy about it. But as we know, fantasy football, there's a lot of luck. You got to have good health with your players, and you got to hit on some of those lineup, decisions. But ultimately, yeah, there is skill. There is a certain level of talent when it comes to being a great fantasy manager that does come into play in order to win a championship. And so that all factors in, but it still is an opportunity for us, especially as followers of Jesus, even in fantasy victory, to do so with humility, to be humble about it, to say, yeah, I won. But the challenge for all of us is the pride and the arrogance. When things go well, when our fantasy team wins, that wants to rear its ugly head, so to speak, right? It's like, oh man, I'm awesome. Look how great I am. I won at fantasy. And then we have to remind ourselves, wait, time out. I didn't put on any cleats. I didn't catch any passes. I didn't throw any game-winning touchdowns. I am a virtual gridiron champion. And that's cool. It's great. I beat my friends. But let's be humble about it. The other side of this, from a fantasy perspective, is we are humbled by fantasy football because the chances are you didn't go undefeated. Nobody goes undefeated in fantasy, regular season all the way to the championship. It's so rare. It's such a rare feat, just like in the NFL. Like, it's so hard to go undefeated. So you still lost. You were still humbled throughout the year. And even when you thought your team was rolling, somebody goes down, injury. You could have started an unbelievable starting lineup in week 17, and you were humbled because somebody got hurt, somebody went down, somebody didn't live up to expectations, and you were humbled even in the championship game. Not to mention all of the teams that lost, too many games to even make the playoffs in their fantasy leagues. And so those guys were humbled as well. And so humility is a part of the process in fantasy football. We will either be humbled or we will have the opportunity to show humility in victory. And so in life, we know that we want to be around people who are humble. Those are the best kind of people. Genuine humility from people are the people that I love being around. Because once I start hanging around the arrogant, prideful guys, it gets difficult. It's hard to be around those guys where it's all about them. It's a show off. It's, hey, look at me, look at me, look at me. And so it's hard to be in a league with those guys because you never want that guy to win the league in fantasy. And then in life, it gets old too. But each of us has that tension. When things go well in life, will we choose pride and arrogance and pointing to ourselves and how great we are? Or do we choose to live with an understanding that every good gift is from God, that in light of who he is, we absolutely must live with humility, to know that everything we have is from him, that we need him for our next breath, our next heartbeat. Like, we have to get back to that, like the ground level. That's where humility starts, is an acknowledgement that God woke me up today. And I'm doing the show because God's given me the ability to put my thoughts and my words together, right? And for you to be able to hear this with your ears, with your eyes, to see it. Like, God allows all that. So we have to get back to that point. And then the other aspect to this is life humbles us, and God humbles us. Because when we live with this mentality of, I'm invincible, I can go undefeated, look what I've done, look how great I am, it's a dangerous path to go down, because we will be humbled. We'll be humbled by this life, which is, there's so much brokenness, there's so much disappointment, there's so many things that happen that humble us and make us realize, oh, I'm not invincible, I'm not in control. And hopefully those are the moments that humble us and bring us to our knees, and we look up and we say, God, I need you. I need you. I'm broken. I'm weak. I need you. And that's the humble prayer. The humble prayer is, I need you, Lord. And so humility is required for us when we initially surrender our lives to Jesus, to say, I can't save myself. I'm a sinful man. I need your grace. I need your forgiveness. I need your salvation. I'm totally dependent on him, Jesus. I'm not dependent on myself, because there's no way I could be good enough. And so that's humility there. And then we live our life in view of that I needed a savior. And every day I need him. One, just to breathe and to walk and to think and to live, but also just to continue to move forward. And whatever we're pursuing, whatever God has led us to do for our careers and our families, we need him. And so in humility, God, I need your strength. God, I need your wisdom. It's all about this heart posture of humility. And so when it comes to the opposite of that, which is pride and arrogance and everything else and the self-dependence, we look to Proverbs 11:2. This is the warning. This is the amplified version. When pride comes boiling up with an arrogant attitude of self-importance, then come dishonor and shame. But with the humble, the teachable, who have been chiseled by trial and who have learned to walk humbly with God, there is wisdom and soundness of mind. So that's the benefit of humility, and then the danger of pride. And so Jesus says in Luke 14:11, for those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. And then Philippians 2:13 says, for it is not your strength, but it is God who is effectively at work in you, both to will and to work. That is strengthening, energizing, and creating in you the longing and the ability to fulfill your purpose for his good pleasure. It's about him. It's about what he's doing in us and through us. And so we humbly walk with him. We humbly seek him. We humbly surrender to him. And so that's the choice that we have each day to operate in pride. I got this. It's up to me. Look what I've done. Or in humility. God, I need you. God, it's all about you. God, I need your grace and your love today. Let that drive me. And so we'll go two more verses. Proverbs 22:4, the reward of humility, that is having a realistic view of one's importance, and the reverent, worshipful fear of the Lord is riches, honor, and life. So that's the reward of humility. And then Psalm 25:9, he leads the humble in what is right and teaches the humble his way. So if we want to go the right way, if we want to remain on the right path, it's with humility. The humble people, that's who he leads. And so he'll show us what is right because we're looking to him. We're trusting him. We're trusting that his way is best, that I don't know the best way. I'm trusting you, Lord. I'm relying on your word. I can't do this on my own. So the sooner we acknowledge that, the sooner we get to the end of ourselves, and even then we can actually experience, God's power and his work, and it comes from a place of humility. And then when things are going well, when God is blessing us, it's receiving it with humility and saying, yeah, God gave me these blessings. How can I use them to honor and glorify him? There's cool things that are happening. How do I point it back to him? That's the opportunity that we have then in humility. And then we know that life is going to humble us. Circumstances, the losing seasons, the tough fantasy seasons humble us and realize, yeah, all right, I got to get better. Things are out of my control. And the same thing in life. Life humbles us, and tough circumstances humble us. And so the ultimate question for us as fantasy managers, if you were humbled this year, are you going to give up on fantasy? Say, nah, I'm not playing anymore. I give up. And same thing in life. I've been humbled so much. Life is too hard. I give up. No. We continue to persevere. We continue to come back. We continue to grow. We continue to keep our eyes fixed on Jesus, and we look to him. And so I hope that's encouraging as we start this year. So often this time of year, we get excited about the possibilities of this year, right? We're going to chase success and blessing and all that kind of stuff, which is okay, cool. Yeah, it's good. But is it from a humble place? Is it with humility that we're going to pursue ultimately what God wants us to pursue? That we are following his path, his plan. We're seeking his will, his glory, his honor. Or is this all about me? And so again, the pride, the humility, it's a daily battle. But let's choose humility, the blessings that come from humility. And ultimately, when we really realize how desperate we are for him, how we need him for every breath, it's a heart of humility. That's what it results in. So that's this week's final breakout, this week's topic. It's the final breakout topic of the season. We gave you 15 this year. And so if you missed any of them throughout the year, we encourage you to check out the topics, and you can read those on fantasyfootballfellowship.com. And would love to know your feedback on these topics that we shared throughout the year as we relate fantasy concepts to life and faith. And so it's always a lot of fun to share these topics with you. And, I was in 2 different leagues that went through the content throughout the year, and just some of the great conversations and different directions that God took us in the conversations. Really, really cool and fruitful and fun. And so I encourage you to check it out, fantasyfootballfellowship.com. All right, let's take a look at the 2023 fantasy season. It began back in the summer when we were talking ADP and rankings and what players were going to be the breakout players this year. Who were the sleepers? Who were the busts that we needed to avoid? Who was going to be the top, wide receiver this year, and what running back was going to have a bounce back year? Those were all the questions. Well, now we've got the answers. And so with all this data, with what we experienced, what do we take away? And so let's begin with the fantasy championships. And who would have thought that Joe Flacco would have won fantasy leagues for you? Are you kidding me? Joe Flacco? That's the biggest surprise of the year. There's no getting around that. Off the couch to start for the Cleveland Browns, team that's been on a tear, and then for him to put up monster numbers against his former team, the Jets, who have consistently been great all season long, their defense, shutting down quarterbacks and wide receivers. And Joe Flacco says, no, I'm good. I got this. Thursday night during the holidays, Joe Flacco. So that was a big one. And then Lamar Jackson, monster game. We were hesitant with him. Can he stay healthy? Can he actually win a fantasy championship for you? Will he be healthy when you need him most? Oh boy, he was healthy. 5 touchdowns. Unbelievable. And then how about the craziness in Miami? The offense was unbelievable all year. Tyreek Hill won a lot of games for you. Didn't have a big game, though, in the championship week. And then Raheem Mostert was really the running back steal of the year, top 5 in points. He was unbelievable. But then at the last second, he was inactive. But thankfully, Devon Achane, baby, he won a championship for me. So he got all the carries, had 20 plus points. Great game for him. So he was a league winner for many people. And then the other running back that was a league winner, Kyron Williams. And when I look back at some of my biggest whiffs of the year, it's definitely not getting, I only had him in one league. And I went in on Cam Akers. And Cam Akers was a huge disappointment. And the whole situation with the Rams, it was just confusing. But there Kyron Williams was the whole year. He was great. He got injured a little bit. But when he was healthy, he was lights out. And so another huge performance during championship week. So Kyron Williams was great. And then CeeDee Lamb. CeeDee Lamb actually absolutely carried teams this year. And you might have been able to get him in that second round. He was, oh my goodness, what a steal. So solid. And then how about Devontae Adams? A weird season for him. The Raiders were a weird team. All that took place there with McDaniels and the quarterback situation. And Devontae Adams, though, his final, the championship game really came through. And I'm even surprised. I saw him win some leagues in my leagues that I'm in. And I'm surprised that he was actually in starting lineups just because it was hard to trust with the Raiders' uncertainty. But a huge day for him. And then, of course, the 49ers. The 49ers were great this year. Brock Purdy, total value. Brandon Ayuk. So when we go back to the tape and say, hey, who did Fantasy Football Fellowship tell us to get? Brandon Ayuk was on that list. So hopefully you got him. He had a big game for me to win a championship. So thrilled with him. And then, of course, CMC, where he was the big injury question. He was worth a number 1 pick in fantasy drafts, but in the back of our mind, it was, can he stay healthy? Can he stay healthy? And then if you relied on him heavily, he let you down in championship week because he got injured. But he still put up about 13 points. And so it was enough for me, but it probably wasn't enough for everybody. But he carried teams to fantasy championships. There's no question about it. Did he win it for you? No, probably not. But what a great season for him. Clearly the number 1 running back. And I would think the most likely first pick next year. We'll see what this injury situation looks like and how they do in the playoffs and all that. But CMC still got some juice left. And he's really a cheat code in fantasy. I mean, like him and then Tyreek Hill when the Dolphins are rolling. Like those two guys are unstoppable. They just score touchdowns at such a high rate. It's truly remarkable. And then I've got to acknowledge this. Jordan Love. I didn't know what to make of him. I was more on the negative side of Jordan Love, but man, did he come through and he won fantasy leagues. So a monster game for him and Jaden Reed. What's his name? Reed from the wide receiver. Unbelievable. He had a tremendous game as well. And so the Packers, they were a weird team this year as well for fantasy purposes. Aaron Jones, you couldn't really count on him. AJ Dillon would get starting opportunities, didn't come through. But Jordan Love overall, he finished as, quarterback. Where did he finish? He was a top 10 quarterback. So just an incredible performance for him in championship and then throughout the season as well. So there you go. So those are some of the big championship takeaways. Just to fill you in, a lot of you guys were loyal listeners that are a part of some of our Unpacking It run leagues. And we did a best ball league this year with an auction. And I'm pretty good at auction drafts, but I got to admit, I did not do well in this best ball auction league. Best ball is a different format. It is a different strategy. And so it's pretty interesting. We had one woman in our league out of 14. She won the league. And I think there was a little bit of auto drafting toward the end, but her team was unbelievable. And so shout out to Kelly for the win. And so the best ball league, though, you whatever your roster is after the draft, that's your roster. And so if you haven't done best ball, it is fun, but you got to put a different fantasy kind of cap on, different mindset and how you draft and the type of players that you want and how you construct a roster, because you want depth. You want some opportunities to survive the season. But then at the same time, what was crazy for Kelly's team, she didn't have a great bench. She just had healthy players that were loaded, that put up huge points toward really all season long. So impressive victory for her. And then we did another Unpacking It league, more of a standard league. We had 2 different divisions and then one champion. And so shout out to Matt Osborne. He's a part of Unpacking It, is a writer, producer for us. And he won the outright league. I will say, though, my team was good. My team was really good. And I fell short in the final 4, and my bench outscored my starters. So I made the wrong lineup decisions. I left George Pickens on the bench because I wanted to make a statement. He didn't block for Jaylen Warren the week before. And I thought that was a big deal. Why didn't you block for your boy? What are you doing? And so I benched Pickens. And boy, did I pay for that. 40 points on the bench. Very big mistake. So anyway, so that cost me that league. But shout out to Matt for winning it. So I finished in the top 4. I think third. I finished third. So solid effort there. And then we also do a 32 team league where a manager owns one NFL team's roster. So we have 32 managers, or some had double up, but we had all these different teams. And at the end of it, we play in week 18 for the championship. It's the 49ers versus the Saints. How about that? Crazy. So the Dolphins and Lions went down this past week. And so now the 49ers, without CMC in week 18, go up against the Saints. So could the Saints actually win the FFF 32 team league? That would be interesting to see. So that's pretty wild. So anyway, overall, I had a great fantasy season. Feel encouraged. It was a fun year. Yeah, I had one league that was really frustrating, a lot of injuries, not a great year. But that was the one that I sort of rallied and picked up some nice keepers for next year and made the most of it, salvaged the season, but was able to get one championship out of my 5 leagues, which was solid, and a couple other good finishes. So overall, good. But where did we miss this year? Who were some of the biggest misses? Who was it for you? Here are a few that where I got it wrong this year. Nick Chubb getting injured week 1. That was costly in 2 of my leagues. Justin Herbert ended up not having the big step forward this year, which was disappointing. And then he got injured when it mattered most in the playoffs. I whiffed on Darren Waller. I'll never draft him again. He'll never be on my roster ever again. Him and Ezekiel Elliott, those 2 players completely have written those guys off. Raheem Mostert, he was the 41st running back taken, ADP, in the summer. And he had an incredible season. He let you down in the championship, but what a year for him. He finished 3rd in total points for the season at the running back position. But I did not pick him in any leagues. So I totally whiffed on him. And then I wrote off Rachaad White, and Rachaad White had a monster season for Tampa Bay. And one of the reasons that, they're most likely going to the playoffs, but he finished 6th in total points, for the Bucs. So, did not get him. I was wrong about Joe Mixon. He had a great season once again. I mean, you can't, we talk about, he's older. No, Joe Mixon, Joe Burrow goes down. Joe Mixon still put up very solid numbers, very reliable throughout the season. So unfortunately, I whiffed on him. However, the guys that I hit on this year, most excited about, I mentioned Brandon Ayuk, Jahmyr Gibbs turned out to be great, but he did let you down in the championship. Not a great championship performance. So that was disappointing, but he's awesome. He ended up finishing great overall for the season. Nico Collins. Oh, man. He was the player that I drafted the most. He was wide receiver 60 ADP and finished right outside the top 12 or so, 14 maybe overall. So very impressive. Also was in on Jaylen Warren. He's only getting better. So he took steps this year. I think that'll continue to happen. You'll be hearing me talk about him next year. And then Adam Thielen delivered for us, and Jacoby Myers delivered for us. Both those guys, good value wherever you drafted them. Excited about those two guys. All right. What about some of the other letdowns from the season? Guys that were still, they were still active. They were out there, but they just didn't come through in the big way because they were first round draft picks. And Austin Eckler. It was a letdown. He still averaged 13.3, so it's not horrible, but you took him top 5. He did not deliver on that. And then Tony Pollard. Oh, I was so excited. He gets the opportunity to be the starter. He averaged 12.9. Very nice season. He was healthy, but he never scored the touchdowns. He never put up the big, 30-point, 40-point weeks that we like to see every once in a while from our running backs. So that was disappointing. And then Cooper Kupp. He averaged 13.7. He only played 12 games. It was inconsistent, and he was overshadowed by Puka. And so you got to talk about Puka. Puka, what a season for him. Out of nowhere. If you snagged him, you're loving life. That was one of the picks of the year. I think you had to draft him. Maybe you picked him up on waivers after week 1. But that was impressive. But anyway, Cooper Kupp, a little bit disappointing. And then Patrick Mahomes. People took him as their top quarterback. He finished 13th points per game for quarterbacks. That's not good. That's a huge drop from 1 to 13 because he was healthy. So you still played him every week. You weren't going to bench him. We kept waiting for him he's going to have a big day. He's going to have a big day. Didn't happen. And then along those lines, Travis Kelce. So when you look at the numbers, Travis Kelce, he was second in total points for tight end behind Laporta. And then he was tied for first points per game, him and Hawkinson, 14.6. So he was still the best tight end. But he didn't give us the big performances. And then the final couple weeks totally let us down. He let me down in 2 leagues. It was devastating. And so we needed more from Kelce. And so, he was trouble when he walked in. How about that? No. So I don't know. I don't know why he had such a bad year. People are talking about, is he injured? Is it Taylor Swift? What's going on? Is he really going to retire? So the Travis Kelce story is interesting, but definitely a letdown there. And then how about this? Here are some of the biggest surprises from the quarterback position. Baker Mayfield finished QB 9. Are you kidding me? Sam Howell, QB 11. Russell Wilson, QB 12. So if you're in a 12-team league, those 3 guys, should have been starters, right? And you drafted them way late. You probably were hesitant to ever start them until, much later in the season. You're like, this can't be real. And the Broncos were struggling for a while. Wilson gets benched, but he still put up good fantasy numbers. And the same with Sam Howell. He was benched and then he played. How weird is that? How weird is Washington? That's a weird franchise. I don't know what to make of them. Hey, I'm a Panthers fan, so it's even weirder down here. But the Washington situation, I'm not sure what they're going to do. But those 3 quarterbacks, very surprising. And then let's see. So I think the other big question for us to dive into more is, as we kind of head into the offseason, we look at the stats, we start preparing for next year's draft. What do we do in the first round? And was our strategy wrong this year? Because I've been playing fantasy for 20 years. I am a believer in the running back start of the draft. I want 2 solid running backs that I can count on. I'll figure out the wide receivers later. But this year, it was like, come on, you're archaic. You can't do that anymore. That's a crazy idea. You've got to take a top tier wide receiver in the first round. And so let's look at, how that turned out. So Justin Jefferson won in a lot of leagues. So you had Jefferson, McCaffrey, Jamar Chase, Austin Eckler, Travis Kelce, Tyreek Hill, Saquon Barkley, Bijan Robinson, Stephon Diggs, Nick Chubb, Devontae Adams, CeeDee Lamb. Those are your top 12 players. So, I think Pollard probably snuck up there that's certain drafts, Garrett Wilson maybe. But those are your guys. So CeeDee Lamb absolutely exceeded expectations. He put up monster numbers. He was incredible. Devontae Adams, I talked about earlier, inconsistent. Diggs, inconsistent. I mean, the Bills, that whole offense is wild. It's hard to know what to expect there. Tyreek Hill, great season, but down the stretch there were some concerns. Right, he didn't deliver like he did in the early part of the season, and then Jamar Chase without his starting quarterback, and then Justin Jefferson without his starting quarterback. So that's part of the risk when drafting a wide receiver that early, because you're counting on the quarterback. And then Jefferson got hurt too, and Chase got a little banged up. But both those guys you couldn't bench, so you had to play them. But they didn't come through for you, to justify their top 3 pick when it came to the fantasy championship and the fantasy playoffs. So does that change our perspective then next year? So if you have the top pick next year, is it, absolutely McCaffrey? And then so you look at the running backs, though, that did go early this year, Barkley, Eckler, Bijan Robinson. So that's going to be the most fascinating player, I think, next year. Like where he goes in drafts next year is going to be even more interesting than this year, because there was so much hype for him, and we saw it. He looked good. He was very good, but Atlanta didn't play him like they should have. And so will they make a change at the coaching position? Who will their quarterback be? And then how early will he go in drafts? But I think we're going to see a swing where we're going to see running backs go early again. More running backs in the first round. I think we're going to swing back to that. I really do. Which makes me happy to a certain extent, but sometimes I like zigging when everybody else is zagging. But you think about the top running backs this year, points per game. So these were points per game. You had CMC, Kyron Williams, Alvin Kamara, Mostert, Achane. I mean, think about that. 2 top 5 running backs from the same NFL team. Do they do that again? And then you got ETN, who had a huge year, Jahmyr Gibbs, Breece Hall, Rachaad White. I have to believe that Breece Hall, Gibbs, Kyron, CMC, all those guys are first rounders for sure. And then you got to consider maybe James Cook. We'll see how he finishes, but then Bijan Robinson, I think, will still be a first rounder. So I think we'll see a lot of those guys in there. It's going to be interesting. And then the second round for sure will be loaded with running backs. So it'll be where it's January. I know it's just kind of the fresh, hey, we got to talk about this a little bit. Think about it now while it's fresh on our minds. And then we'll do all the prep and the draft research throughout the offseason. But those are some interesting takeaways. And then really the quarterback position. Why would you ever take one early? Because the pendulum swung a little bit on that as well. Because we used to always say, you can get somebody late. You can get Kirk Cousins late. You don't have to take one of those guys early. But this year, we saw how, some of the top quarterbacks let us down. We didn't necessarily see the jump that we anticipated from Justin Fields or Justin Herbert or Trevor Lawrence. Those guys didn't make the leap that we had hoped. But Jalen Hurts was still solid. Josh Allen was still solid. Mahomes let us down. But then, the Burrow injury, the Cousins injury, Deshaun Watson. I mean, we saw Anthony Richardson. We saw a lot of guys go down. So does that now change our perspective? Ooh, I don't want to spend a second, third, fourth rounder on a quarterback. I'll wait, and I'll get some value. I'll get, the next CJ Stroud, or even CJ Stroud. Maybe he'll probably get a little bit of hype next year. But you wait for some of those guys that came in. Some of these rookies came in right away. Not the guy for the Panthers, but for some of these other teams, Anthony Richardson, when healthy, was awesome. And then CJ Stroud. So, and then, like I said, Sam Howell and Baker Mayfield, they delivered. Russell Wilson. Does Russell Wilson start somewhere else next year? I don't know. We'll see. So those are some interesting, just strategy, philosophy that we got to kind of reconsider. But when it does come to receivers, there weren't too many receivers out of nowhere that got into the top 10. DJ Moore getting into the top 10, a little bit surprising, but he's proven to be a really good receiver. Even in Carolina, when the quarterback play was bad, he always still at least showed, hey, I can be a good receiver. Just get me the ball. And so Chicago was able to get him the ball this year. He played well. And then Mike Evans. I mean, how many times my hand is raised? We've written off Mike Evans, and he just continues to deliver. And so he finished 7th this year for wide receivers in total points. That means he was healthy. And despite the Eagles, I think, kind of having some struggles here from a real football standpoint, from a fantasy standpoint, A.J. Brown finished fourth wide receiver, total points. So really good season for him. And Tyreek, Tyreek was still 2nd total points. So huge year for him. And then CD finished number 1 for Dallas. Can he repeat that? How early does he go next year? I mean, that was, to me, it was outrageous. The numbers that he was putting up week in, week out in Dallas, remarkable. So shout out to our boy Luke for his Cowboys. Man, if you snagged CeeDee Lamb end of the first, early second, I have to think you won your fantasy league this year. So that's impressive. And then last thing we'll talk about the tight end position. What will our approach be? What do we learn from this year? Well, one, the rookies, the young guys, they've shown that, hey, we've got some more options. We got some more guys to look at this year. It's not just the 3 tight ends that we thought. It was Hawkinson and Mark Andrews and Kelsey. Well, now we got to consider Laporta. Evan Ingram, total points, 4th. So he was a guy, at least Harrison, I know, talked about. I like Jacksonville this year. They hit or miss. ETN had a great year. Trevor Lawrence was a letdown. But Njoku in Cleveland, monster year, monster championship game. And then, you had, Ferguson and McBride and Laporta. So some of those guys were really good. So Goddard was okay. I don't know if you could fully trust him. He finished 10th in points per game. But Kittle had a nice little bounce back. We were concerned about him, but there was enough to go around in San Francisco. It's 49ers, so many fantasy relevant players, and they won a lot of leagues for people. So congratulations if you had some Niners players. But those are some of my takeaways from the season. It was a fun year. It really was. It was wild. Again, Joe Flacco, are you kidding me? I saw him play in college. I was in college at App State when we played Delaware in the national championship game, and that game was over at halftime. App State beat Delaware in the championship. So, and Flacco was the quarterback. So let me just make sure that is clear, okay? And then to think that he's still in the league all these years later, and I cut him. I played Stidham. I played Jarrett Stidham instead of Joe Flacco. Still won, but that was a bad. And then actually the week before I lost because I played Nick Mullins instead of Flacco, and that was a mistake. So that cost me. So Flacco, way to go. Good job there. But one other thing. So I mentioned I won 1 championship. So at our church, we did 4 leagues with individual champions of each league, 12 guys in each league. Actually, one had 10. But then we had a 1 overall the 4 leagues. I finished 2nd there. This one guy, he had everybody. He had Lamar, Devontae Adams, Kyron Williams, James Conner, all the guys that had big championship weeks, he had them. So congratulations to Jonathan for that win at our church league. So if you're thinking about next year, how you structure your leagues, a lot of different ways. You can reach out to me. We've tried some different things, whether at church, my own, home leagues, unpacking it leagues, different formats, different structures, a lot of ways to enjoy fantasy football. So I hope you had a fun season, and I appreciate you joining us for the ride, being a part of the journey here on the Fantasy Football Fellowship podcast. Thanks to Luke and Matt and Harrison. Of course, we missed Harrison today. So yeah, we'll try to, I got to catch up on him. I got to see how he finished with his championships because he lost in our best ball championship. So we didn't get a chance to kind of talk to him about that. So we missed that, but we appreciate Harrison. Did an awesome job this year. Once again, his 3rd season here on the show. And so thanks to all of our listeners, our loyal listeners. We appreciate you. Thanks to all of our supporters. We'll be back in the summer. So we'll take a break from the fantasy show during the off season, but we'll be back in the summer to start some draft prep and gearing up for another season of Fantasy Football Fellowship. So congratulations to all the winners. Thanks for listening. Happy New Year. I'm Bryce. I'm a sports fan and a fantasy manager who follows Jesus. I believe in the good news that he died on the cross for my sin. He was resurrected, and through faith, I've been saved by his grace. I hope that is true for you as well, and I hope you'll join me as we live life as sports fans and fantasy managers who follow Jesus together. Have a great year, great rest of your day, and we will talk to you next time on the Fantasy Football Fellowship podcast. Be humble in victory and defeat. That's the breakout today. Have a good one.